The moment so many of you have been asking for is finally here. I have gotten my hands on the new 2022 Tesla Model S, courtesy of a longtime viewer, Kenny, so big thanks to him for providing his own personal Model S with just under 2,000 miles on the odometer for me to do a week-long testing in it. Much like Tesla itself, the Model S has not been without controversy. The very fact that 2022 is a bit more of a refresh than a redesign is itself somewhat controversial. And Tesla tends to be a very polarizing brand, so keep that in mind as we walk through the Model S and, of course, the Tesla ecosystem in this video. Although a little bit less important today, the Model S is a very important vehicle in historical terms for the electric vehicle movement. Not because this was the first mass-produced electric vehicle, because it wasn't, but because the Model S was the first electric car that proved that electric cars could be sexy and they could be fun. Up until this point, honestly, electric cars were dogs. They were generally a little on the ugly side, they were a little on the useless side, they had short ranges, they didn't have a lot of cargo capacity, and they certainly were not fun. A lot of folks ask who killed the EV1. I have always argued it was stillborn from the very beginning because it was not what people wanted in general car terms, unlike the Model S, which I would argue definitely is. The same basic Model S has now been on sale in America for 10 years, but it's not quite that simple because Tesla has changed the Model S significantly over time. They just don't go about refreshes the same way that the German car companies do. In that respect, they're a little bit more like Volvo, constantly updating the product year on and year on, rather than bottling up changes and having a car that is unchanged for 3 years and then releasing a mass of changes all at once. So even since this car went on sale, the 2022 model year Model S, I should say, we have new headlights and some slight tweaks to the tail lamp designs. There are also possibly a few other changes under the skin that we don't know about just yet. The big change up front is that now the Model S has Matrix-style LED headlights. These are full LEDs, but they're not the new Matrix technology LEDs. We do have full LED fog lights below, and the front bumper is going to look more or less the same if you were to order a Model S now and get one delivered a little bit later in 2022. Whether you want to call the Model S a refresh or a redesign, I suppose depends on your baseline. Are you talking about versus a 2012 Model S or a 2021 Model S? Because since 2012, there have been a boatload of different battery packs, different motor designs. There have even been some suspension tweaks. We now no longer get the steel spring suspension. All Model S's are going to have the adaptive air suspension standard. In case you're wondering, this Model S is not the Plaid Model S. This is the one that starts at $99,990. Definitely a high price tag for sure, but again, right in line with the E63, BMW M5, etc. In fact, you can actually get the next step down in the Mercedes-AMG lineup up to this kind of pricing. You can get an E53 up to over $100,000. And this is solidly a mid-size luxury sedan in America. This is about 198 inches long, just under. That puts this right in the same size category as something like the E-Class or the BMW 5 Series, and actually a little bit more compact than a Volvo S90. If you're not familiar with the Model S, you might only notice the wide body modifications if you park one of these next to an older Model S, but we definitely have a more aggressive hip shape here. It's always been there in the Model S, but it's a little bit more accentuated with the wider body. The wider tires and wheels are definitely noticeable in the back. These are 285 40R19s on this particular model, and these are Pirelli P0s. If you don't like the aero cover here, you can remove it from the alloy wheel because we do have an alloy wheel under there. So if you like that design better, you can actually pop out the Tesla logo and put it right there in the middle of the alloy. Obviously, that is going to reduce your range versus the aero cover. It is here for a reason, but if you prefer this look, you don't have to pay extra. And of course, if you accidentally scuff up your aero cover, these are going to be a little bit cheaper to replace than an alloy. Charging happens behind door number 1, integrated into the rear tail lamp module on the driver's side. This is a proprietary Tesla charging connector, although they do include a J1772 adapter. So we plug that into our adapter, right like that, and then plug that into the Tesla. If you order a Model S now, this door is going to be a little bit different because it looks like the Model S is preparing for the availability and compatibility of Tesla's in-house designed CCS adapter. I don't normally talk about build quality and panel gaps for 2 reasons. The first one is that it really has no impact on long-term vehicle reliability, as some folks will for some reason conflate these 2 things. Just because a panel may not align back here and on the front of the vehicle doesn't mean that, I don't know, a wheel is going to suddenly pop off as you drive down the road. And the second thing is, it's really a matter of personal preference. If the panel gaps don't bother you, then they don't bother you. If the panel gaps do, then there might be another car out there with better panel gaps. Now that said, this Model S is definitely light years ahead of the first Model S that I saw in the wild, and certainly definitely better than the Model 3 that we bought here at Alex & Autos some time ago. The panel gaps on all the doors, they all align right. The panel gaps on the glass roof, those all look pretty good. The panel gaps around the headlights, they're just a little bit off, as is this little gap right here around the hatch, but honestly, build quality in this is pretty identical to the average BMW or Mercedes that you might find on the lot. And no, I'm really not kidding. Today we also have in the driveway a Kia EV6, a Hyundai Ioniq 5, and a BMW i4. And just for giggles, I went around and measured some panel gaps in the i4. The panel gap over here on the driver's side is about 50% larger than the panel gap over there on the passenger side, and the panel gap up front on the hood is about 20% larger than the panel gap right here at the end of the hood. We find very similar panel gaps over here on the doors and on the back. So to be perfectly honest, if you have a problem with Tesla Model S build quality, then you also have a problem with BMW i4 build quality. Interestingly, the Ioniq 5 seems to be assembled with a little bit greater precision than our long-term EV6. Now that that controversy is out of the way, let's talk about the drivetrain and bring up some new controversies along the way. This is not a true skateboard-style battery electric vehicle like we see in some prototypes. This is the more common and more rational sort of battery in-body design. So this is a unibody vehicle, the front and rear electric motors bolt to the unibody, and then the battery bolts in underneath. But what is different about this versus a lot of EV conversions, say the BMW i4 that I just mentioned, is that this unibody design was designed from the ground up to accommodate the battery and for the battery to offer some structural reinforcement for the vehicle. That's definitely different than we find in EVs out there that have shared bodies between plug-in hybrids, and full electric vehicles. This was designed from the ground up to have that battery there, and that does yield more efficient packaging and, generally speaking, more efficient weight and greater efficiency. Efficiency has long been a hallmark of the Tesla brand, and that certainly continues for 2022. Over time, Tesla has changed the front seat design, so definitely keep that in mind. But I found this seat to be very comfortable over a week of driving. It has a 4-way adjustable lumbar support that's memory linked to profiles there in the instrument cluster. We also have a power tilt telescopic steering column with a reasonable range of motion, and the front passenger seat has the same range of motion as the driver's seat. Keep in mind that when we're talking about most luxury vehicles with a 6-figure price tag, we're going to find things like massaging seats, extending thigh cushions in those vehicles, and we do not find that in the Model S. I do think that's a bit of a lost opportunity. I really would have loved to have seen an extending thigh cushion here because I do find the seat bottom cushion to be a little on the short side. Jumping into the back seat, we find a reasonable amount of legroom. I have about 4 inches or so behind the driver's seat, adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. The seat bottom cushion is a little bit close to the ground for my preference, but that likely is why we get good headroom back here. If I lean my head all the way back to the headrest, I have about 3/4 of an inch of headroom left. With the Model S, Tesla really pioneered some of the design cues that we see in a lot of other EVs out there, like this full panel glass roof. That really helps improve headroom because normally you'd have a steel roof, you'd have a bit of insulation, then you'd have a headliner. All that takes up room, and they can give you more of a feeling of spaciousness back here by this full glass roof, which definitely gives us better headroom for the overall profile. Now keep in mind, the interior body of the Model S is going to be a little bit more compact than some luxury midsize sedans. That's probably why the seat bottom cushion is a little closer to the ground. We do have a completely flat floor back here, just as you'd expect in a modern EV. Sitting right here in the middle, I actually have about the same kind of headroom that I have in the outboard sitting positions, even though this seat is higher off the ground. Thanks to the lift-back design, the Model S has always excelled when it comes to cargo practicality. We have just over 28 cubic feet of cargo capacity back here. There's a hard cargo cover on top. It snaps in place with magnets, which is a nice touch. You can fold it back, or you can completely remove it from the vehicle. There's also a deep cargo storage well right here under this portion of the load floor because the Model S does not have a spare tire. The other reason for that particular design choice was that the Model S originally came in a 7-passenger version where there was a very 1970s rear-facing seat back here, but that option is no longer available for 22. The underfloor storage well is not quite large enough to accommodate a 24-inch roller bag, but I fit a 22-inch roller bag completely under the floor without a problem. If you're a front trunk fanatic, you might want to block your ears because the front trunk in the Model S has shrunk. It is still openable via the remote control, which is a feature that I definitely love. But under here, we have a front trunk that is now about the same size as the one that we find in a Volvo XC40 once you've removed its foam dividers. The result is that now my 22-inch roller bag that I also use for testing will just barely fit in the front trunk. As we look around the interior, you should know that it's largely shared between the Plaid and non-Plaid models. We have sliding sun visors. They're held onto the ceiling by magnets. Tesla's use of magnets for some of these interior components actually is really quite innovative. I like that definitely a lot. We again have that large panoramic moonroof. You can see how large it is. We have fixed height shoulder belts, height adjustable headrests for the driver and front passenger, and an entirely vegan interior. You can see that the ceiling and the pillars are coated in that Alcantara-like faux suede fabric. The front seats are heated and ventilated. This is one of the few Teslas that offers ventilated seats. Moving over to the front doors, we find a lot of soft touch materials and a fabric insert right there to help dress things up a little bit more. Large speaker grille down there at the bottom. You can see that we have an electric door release. We then also have an emergency mechanical door release right there. That's what that's for. The attention to detail and the assembly quality has definitely improved inside versus the first Model S. We also have Tesla's new sort of air blade style air vents here. You notice we don't have any normal air vents. All of that is controlled via the infotainment system, and here's how it works. You can see over here on the instrument cluster it a little better. We have a little slot right there, and then if we look up top, there's a slot right up there as well. Using internal baffles, the vehicle will direct air out of the slot in the bottom and the slot in the top in ways that make the airflow either move directly at your face or it can split it apart, etc. The animation inside this infotainment system is pretty accurate. So for instance right here it's all sort of one flow and you can direct that around like that, or you can split the airflow and have it go to either side of your head. One sort of benefit for the funky steering wheel here is that you can have airflow right at your face if you want to without chilling your hands, because of course your hands can't go up here. They can only go on the side, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Under the infotainment system, we find a dual-chi wireless charging mat and then a really customizable center console. Lots of wood trim going on here. There's a lid that will completely cover this area, so you can see that wood grain there, or you can close it off in two different steps, that midway step and that faraway step right there. You can then also pull in a storage cubby like that. It's a shallow one. You have access to that very deep storage well right there, and then we have a cup holder that can slide out like that. You can cover the whole area, even with that cup holder in that position. Over here we have the controversial Yoke steering wheel. Now at the moment there is no factory option to get a regular steering wheel with the top, although there are some aftermarket solutions that are trying to work on that particular problem. I don't find the touch buttons on the steering wheel to be controversial, however. The turn signals are over here, touch buttons for left and right. I think that's just fine. This control wheel does track forward, backward, volume up, down, and it controls a few other features depending on the mode you're in over there. Turn signals don't auto-cancel in the normal way. You can see that that turn signal is just blinking and blinking and blinking. Instead of the regular 3 blink and then stop, this will actually try an adaptive mode where it's looking at the lane lines and it will keep blinking until you've actually done something where the vehicle thinks the turn signal should turn off. One odd touch, no horn button right there. The horn button is over here. You have to touch that one for the horn. Over here we have the cruise control controls that engages the autopilot system. Windshield wiper control there, voice command button. If you want to activate the wipers, we press this button once, and then over here you'll see a menu will pop up. We then use this scroll wheel here to change the mode. Now about the wheel itself, it is definitely difficult to get used to, I found. Over a week and a few hundred miles of driving, I really never got used to this. And the problem for me is a lot of parking lot maneuvers. You can't do shuffle steering, and if you're in a parking lot maneuver like that, it's kind of odd because the steering wheel can like whip around and you end up grabbing it weirdly. Just not a big fan of this steering wheel design. Out on the open highway, it's not really a problem, although the steering wheel is very oval shaped. You should know that. So over here, it's definitely much wider than it is in this direction. And I found that it was really generally only comfortable to drive down the road with both hands on the wheel. I suppose that's definitely an advantage. But you should definitely resist the impulse to try and drive like this, because if the steering wheel jerks out of your hand, you can end up possibly missing the steering wheel on its return. Now it's time to get the Model S out on the road. So let's talk about things perhaps a little bit out of order here. Once you get behind the wheel, again, you put it in drive by sliding your finger right there on the touchscreen. I don't find that to be too much of a problem, but you can already see in some of these slower speed maneuvers the sort of problem with this Yoke steering wheel. The fact that it's not round and the fact that the bottom is certainly not round is kind of annoying. The important thing to know about this Yoke steering column is that the steering ratio is not adjustable like we expect to see in the upcoming Lexus with the Yoke. So if I decide, oh, I forgot something at home and I need to do a 3-point turn here, you'll notice this is not a reduced number of lock-to-lock turns versus the regular Model S steering wheel, and this actually ends up being more of a 4-point turn here, I guess, actually, with that pile in the way. You can see it's just a little bit cumbersome to do. You can sort of put your hand on one corner of the wheel and rotate the wheel around like you can in a regular wheel, but it is a little bit more difficult just due to this general design. And if you're a fan of shuffle steering, that's just not something that's easy to do with this wheel design. Also, when you release it like that and you want to grab it in the middle, it's a little bit difficult to grab versus a round steering wheel. I just wish that Tesla would give us at least the option to select a round wheel. Even if it was a factory accessory that you had to pay extra for after you bought the vehicle, I think I would still be fine with that because it is a luxury car. It's designed to be a little bit sexy, a little bit unique. Now, going a little bit out of order, we should talk about ride quality since we are on this rougher road here. Ride quality in the Model S is excellent. The S and the X drive very differently from the Model 3 and the Model Y. That's because this has a much more expensive adaptive air suspension system versus the regular steel spring setup that we find in those less expensive Teslas. But the big thing is that it gives this a very large sedan-like ride quality, and a little bit more variation in terms of the feel than we find in traditional adaptive dampers in a regular steel spring suspension that's had those adaptive dampers fitted, because this can adjust the spring rate effectively as well as adjust the damping characteristics. So when it comes to ride quality, I'm certainly going to give this an A. The Model S really adapts well to a variety of different road surfaces, from a well-paved road surface like the one that I'm on here to a rough paved road surface, etc. And again, a really nice touch is that if you're on a really bumpy washboard style surface, it will automatically adapt the ride height to give you better cushioning if that's what's going to improve the ride quality. Now, of course, we need to talk about acceleration because that is the batshit bonkers thing about the Model S, whether we're talking about the Plaid or the non-Plaid version. And honestly, I would rather get the Model S in the non-Plaid version because I think this flies a little bit below the radar. Obviously, it's about 20% less expensive or so, and this is just so fast. I just don't think you need the Plaid, to be perfectly honest. But I'm glad the Plaid exists because it helps justify this model. It doesn't seem quite as irrational as a vehicle that goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds even. This is a little bit faster than Tesla's claim of 3.1 seconds. And unlike Tesla's claims with the Model S Plaid, you don't need to be on a slick drag surface, you don't need special tires in order to actually get that wicked fast 0 to 60 time. This will go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds on a wide variety of road surfaces. It is very, very fast. All you have to do is go to controls, go to the pedals and steering option, and then choose the drag strip mode. If you're just in regular insane, then it is 3.1 seconds, definitely still absolutely insane. And if we choose chill, then things definitely calm down a bit. 0 to 60 in chill happens in 7 seconds even. More importantly than the quick 0 to 60 time is the fact that thanks to the wide body treatment and the upgraded tires and wheels, basically borrowed out of the Plaid, this now has the handling ability that you'd expect out of a vehicle that goes 3 seconds 0 to 60, but is still a fairly big luxury sedan. 60 to 0 stopping distance is 110 feet. That is definitely very short, right in line with a number of BMW 3 Series models. And although I don't have access to a skid pad, I know folks that do, and they have recorded 1G of lateral acceleration in the Model S. Handling is absolutely excellent, and definitely above the last Model S that I drove. A valid criticism of the Model S when it first launched is that it was definitely fast, but the handling capabilities didn't quite match that acceleration profile. Now that is definitely not the case. The Model S handles incredibly well. I keep talking about the German competition because, of course, they're the big boys in this segment volume-wise, but also you could logically consider this a competitor to the sportiest versions of the Lucid Air. Now, I haven't driven the Lucid just yet, so keep that in mind, but hopefully I will be at some point soon. And you could also consider this competition to a wide variety of modern EVs that are a lot less expensive. On the sports car side, obviously we have the Porsche Taycan, but it's not going to have the same kind of range that we find in the Model S. It also is considerably smaller on the inside. On the inside, it really is quite tight. It's like a miniaturized Panamera, and this is a little bit closer to Panamera in terms of interior dimensions. The Taycan is an interesting competitor because when that vehicle was conceived, the Model S did not offer the extreme performance options that it does now, and it didn't offer the same kind of handling ability that we find now standard in the Model S. So when the Taycan was first launched, it was definitely the option to choose if you wanted repeatable 0 to 60 times and you wanted incredible handling. But arguably, repeatable 0 to 60 times and incredible handling also happened in the Model S, while also giving you a bigger cabin, longer range, higher efficiency, and of course all the promise of Tesla's software updates, which interestingly enough I have just received while driving this Tesla, and it has now addressed a few concerns in the infotainment system. It has more customizable buttons down there. But back to the ride section here. When it comes to cabin noise, I measured 70 decibels in here, making this one of the quieter EVs that we've tested, even though we do have those wider tires all the way around. So Tesla has definitely invested in cabin quietness and cabin isolation. When it comes to efficiency, the Model S does incredibly well. Again, keep in mind we have those wide summer tires in this model. I averaged 3.61 miles per kilowatt hour over my range test on this vehicle. That is a very, very good number. Now, some people may be disappointed by that because 3.61 miles per kilowatt hour yields 345 miles of real-world range. That is definitely below 405. Now, in my real-world range testing, you should definitely consider that your range will be plus or minus about 20 miles or so, depending on how you're driving the vehicle. If you live in a very flat area and you keep your top speed to 55, you might be able to get 400 miles of range out of the vehicle. But to be honest, I don't consider that to be a problem at all, because 345 miles is an excellent range score, and the efficiency for me is more important than the range figure, period. Because this is going to cost less to drive 200 miles, cost less to drive 300 miles than a lot of the competition that's going to be significantly less efficient. Now, over a week of mixed driving, I've been averaging a little bit higher than my range test, about 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour, so you might get a little bit above depending on your exact topography and your exact driving style. Bottom line with the Model S, this is very impressive. Handling ability is absolutely excellent, and this is a ton of fun to drive out on your favorite winding mountain road. The only downside, again, is the steering wheel. And to be perfectly honest, I would probably be one of those people that would try and swap in one of the original Model S's steering wheels into this, even though that would include an aftermarket adapter kit, it seems like. I really hope that Tesla addresses that, because for me, out on the road, and to be perfectly honest, even off the road, that's really the only flaw I can find.